Welcome to our class on Chassidus. We're going to be learning a beautiful Chassidic discourse from the Rebbe. The name of the Chassidic discourse is called Balaylo Hahu. The Rebbe said this Chassidic discourse in Purim in the year of Tafshin Mem Dalid, 40 years ago, and the Rebbe went on to certify and edit this Chassidic discourse in honor of Purim in the year Tafshin Mem Ches, which is exactly 36 years ago. So again, the Chassidic discourse is based on the verse in the Megillah where it says, Ba'layla hu, on that night, Nodada Shnas HaMelech, that the king's sleep went away, he couldn't sleep. So the Rebbe says, he brings from the previous Rebbe, on a Chassidic discourse with this same title, that it's brought down the customs of the Maril, that when you read the Megillah, and you say Balaylahu, so you have to elevate your voice. And why is that? Because this Balaylahu is the main miracle. And it was from Balaylahu, that night when the king couldn't sleep, that's the real power, and that's when the strength of the miracle started. So the previous Rebbe asked, 1 second, the main miracle was Esther pleading on behalf of the Jewish people. The famous word she says, Ki nimcharnu ani v'ami, myself and my nation were sold. And also the preparation she did before that, to gather all the Jewish people and to fast. And over here, what are you saying? The main miracle is the fact that the king couldn't sleep. So he brings over there where it's brought down in the Medrash, that when it says Balaylahu, it's not talking about Achashverosh. It's talking about the king of the world. Who couldn't sleep? Hashem couldn't sleep. So the question is, what do you mean? Does Hashem sleep and Hashem awake? And the answer is yes. When, unfortunately, the Jewish people sin, Hashem makes himself like he's sleeping. However, when we do the will of Hashem, then the verse says, La yonum v'la yishain, Hashem does not sleep, nor does he doze off. Now, what does that mean? As we know that human beings, Adam, are compared to Hashem on high. And therefore, everything that takes place on high, it's the way we behave in this world. We are called Adam. In other words, like the expression of Zohar is, La'elo kigabna d'lotata. On high is exactly the way it takes place down here. And like the verse says, Kemayim haponim al ponim. You're standing in front of a mirror. What do you see in the mirror? The face you put in there. You're smiling, you're going to see a smile. You're going to put in a frown, you're going to get a frown. And the same thing also, the heart of one person to the other. The heart, the emotions that you show, that's the emotions you get back. And so therefore, when the Jewish people are in a situation where the Jewish people are sleeping, what does that mean we're sleeping? That they are learning Torah and are doing mitzvahs is in a situation that we're sleeping. So what happens is Hashem goes to sleep, so to speak. And like it says clearly in the prophets, Ani yashena, I'm sleeping. And what does the Zohar say? When is Hashem sleeping? Begalusa, in exile. Because, unfortunately, the Jewish people are sleeping in exile. So what happens then is, Hashem, so to speak, goes to sleep. And that's why, when it says in the Megillah, on that night, the king couldn't sleep, referring to Hashem, that's the power of the miracle. Why? Because according to the way things flow from one level to the next, so exile is a time for Hashem to sleep. And this that the fact that in Gullus, Balaylahu was Gullus, it was exile. Hashem couldn't sleep. Now we're talking about something good is happening. Now a miracle's happening. And that's why the verse says specifically, Nodada Shnas HaMelech. Like it went away from him. In other words, what does that mean? That the sleep went away from him because basically that he was sleeping. And that's his default setting in exile. And in the times of Gullus, it is a time for sleeping. But the miracle was that not the mimenu, even though it was Gullus, and even though the default setting is asleep, the sleeping went away. And it continues on in that Chassidic discourse to explain what does it mean Hashem is sleeping. And he gives an example from a human being. Like we know it says clearly, Mipsari echzeh, you want to know about godliness, look at your own body. Now, what's the difference practically between someone that's awake and someone that's sleeping? In other words, if you look at someone that's awake and someone that's sleeping, is there a difference in their essence? No, because the fact is, because when someone is sleeping, the essence is still complete. In other words, when a person is sleeping, the person still has all his limbs, and he has all the energy going through it, and you have all the powers, the intellect, and the emotions, and they also do its job while sleeping. And like we see literally, when a person is sleeping, they have dreams. And in the dreams, you have the effect of all the powers that we have: intellect, emotions, will, and tainug, up to the point that when you merit what you think about in your dreams is powerful, true intellect. And the same thing also in reference to pleasure and will and so on and so forth. Now, even someone that's not on this level, but you see, the fact is that in the dreams, there's emotions, there's intellect, there's will, there's pleasure about things that exist. However, when it comes to things which are totally impossible, like for example, an elephant to go into a hole of a needle, obviously you can't have that in a dream because that's not real. So what's the difference between someone that's sleeping and someone that's awake? Because when a person's awake, so everything is organized. Everything is organized. And how much more so, you can't have opposite things when you're awake at the same time. Or like in one connection. Or not even if it's totally connected. So when you're awake, everything is organized. Everything has its place. However, and when all the things are so to speak in place, so then you see the difference. This is a higher thing, a lower thing, not only physically higher and physically lower, we mean spiritually higher, spiritually lower. However, when a person is sleeping, when a person is dreaming, so you can have two opposite powers. That you can have a higher power, a lower power, higher, and so on and so forth, and you can even have you can even connect two different ideas in a way where it's not organized, or in a way where you don't realize what's the higher one, what's the lower one. So basically, when a person's awake, everything is organized, and you see what's higher and slower. Person sleeping, it's one big mishmash. What does this mean practically on referring to on high and Hashem? In other words, when Hashem is, so to speak, sleeping, it's not noticeable which is the higher one, which is the lower one, which is the higher, which is the lower one, and that's the connection between the time of exile and sleeping. And also in the time of exile, when Hashem is, so to speak, sleeping. Because what's the reason why we're in exile? Because what's not noticeable is what's higher. What's higher? The quality of the Jewish people. As we know clearly, why we hire, because it says clearly, we are children of Hashem. Like the verse says, Bonim atam l'Hashem Elokeichem. You're sons of God, or at least we're servants of Hashem. Like the verse says, Im kibonim, im kabonim. Either we're like sons or we're like servants. And as we know, the servant of a king is part of the king. And not only Kim Melech, like a king. Like a chap means like it's like a king. But literally we're part of the king. And the fact is, where does a son have to be? A son has to be sitting by his father's table. And where does a servant have to be? Also at the table of his master. Now what's the reason why we're not sitting at the father's table? Is because unfortunately we're into exile. We're in exile. And what does that come from? That comes from sleeping. Because what happens in sleeping, we just explained, there's no difference in the essence. A Jew is still a Jew, and a non-Jew is not a non-Jew. The difference is that when Hashem is sleeping, you don't see the quality, you're a child and a servant of Hashem, and you should be sitting by Hashem's table. And that creates the exile, because what's really higher is not noticeable. And he continues on the Chassidic discourse to explain that this time when a person is sleeping, you don't see the difference of a higher quality. So what does that mean? So what does it mean when you don't see the difference? It's like when you take all the powers that we have, the intellect, the emotions, the functional midas, etc. So the fact is they exist, on each one has its own place. But when it exists in the etzem hanefesh, in the essence of the soul, everyone over there, it's all equal. Once it comes down to lower levels, this is the intellect, this is the emotions, etc. But the way they are in the essence of the soul, it's all one. In other words, if the powers are concealed in time of sleeping, it's like where the powers go back and get concealed in its source, in the Etzem HaNefesh. And what does that mean practically? In the parable, notice this, that during exile, the powers are concealed. What does that mean? It means that it going back to its source, up to the place of Atzmos. In other words, Rebbe is bringing out a very powerful point. So important, I want to talk about this for a second, so it'll help us going forward. Till now, what we learn, that during Golus, during exile, Hashem is, so to speak, sleeping. What happens when Hashem is sleeping? So even though the Jewish people are sons or servants, and we should be with Hashem, but it's not noticeable because Hashem is sleeping. Now there was quoting from the previous sermon saying something even deeper. Why isn't it noticeable? If that's the way it is, because it goes back to its source, and in the source, yes, it's all one. There's no difference in intellect and emotions. And therefore, in the source, there's no difference between a Jew and anyone else. It's really, really all one in its source. And like it's brought down in the Zohar. The Zohar says like this. Based on the verse, it says ki einenu, because he's not there. What does that mean? What does it mean it's not there? It doesn't mean it's not there. It means that Hashem took it to a higher place. In other words, it went up to a higher place, a chamber within a chamber. So when we say that during the time of exile, it's concealed, it's only concealed down here. In other words, in the time of exile, the light gets elevated to a very, very high place, and therefore it's not revealed down here. But the light didn't change. And on the contrary, it's actually in a deeper place. So in the time of Golus, yeah, it's not noticeable that we have the quality of Banim, but we're actually, that's in the revealed place. But since we're going to a concealed place, it's even stronger. And like, for example, he gives the example when someone's sleeping down in this world, that what's sleeping? The body's sleeping. In other words, what does that mean? The light of the soul leaves the body. But the soul, on the contrary, what happens to the soul when you're sleeping? It goes up on high, and it actually receives from the source of light. So it's from the source of life. So what does that mean? Generally, all this seder hishtalsha, so things flow down from one level to the next through the sfirot, etc. That's the way it corresponds to the powers of the soul. In other words, just like in the powers of the soul. So it's where do you start developing the different powers, the way they're sourced in the soul? So in the first level, it's all equal. Afterwards, when it comes down and starts being revealed, and it starts coming into the limbs of the body, so then you have this is powers this, and that's bad power, and so on and so forth. And in the revealed powers, there's also different levels. Just the way like it's revealed in an organized way, like when a person's awake, and then you have it the way it's in a concealed way, when a person's sleeping. And up to the point where you have a situation where a person is fainting. So the same thing also in a spiritual level, you have all these levels. And like Chazal teach us, just like the soul fills the body, so the same thing also Hashem fills the world. In other words, the beginning of the Sfirot, the way they're included in the infinite light of Hashem, and over there, you can't divide it up, it's all one. But when it comes down to the world of Atzilut, now even though the world of Atzilut is the world of unity, but nevertheless, you have already the finite spheres, and you have the division of the spheres, where we know it's 10 and not 9, and it's 10 and it's not 11, and then you realize the quality of each sphere. And how much more so when it comes down to the world of Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah, in the lower worlds, lower than the world of Atzilus, and that's when it goes down and gets divided even more. But before Atzilus, all the different spheres, it's all one, it's one package. You can't see the difference between Keser, Chachma, and Malchus. In Atzilus already they get divided, not necessarily in a physical way, and then it keeps on going down to the world of Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah. And then it comes down, literally the way it comes down to this physical world. And like we know, for example, the Beis Hamikdash, the Holy Temple, which we know is the most chosen place in the world, and from the Beit Hamikdash, even though it's in this world, the light goes out to the whole world. In other words, what does that mean? The Beis Hamikdash is in this world, but the fact is there are certain places in the world that have a greater light. And from there it goes out to the world. What does that mean? Because the world by nature, Olam comes from the word of concealment. The world by nature is concealed. There's no light in the world. But in the world, you have from the light of the Beit HaMikdash, from the temple. And we know that's the soul of the world. Just like when things flow down from the Sfirot, that a lower sphere receives from a higher sphere. And then what do we notice? The real quality of the Jewish people. And over there we notice the quality that we're children of Hashem, and we're servants of Hashem, and we're faithful servants of Hashem. So that's all the way it gets revealed when a person's awake. When you're awake, what happens in time of exile, and you don't see the difference. So the way it's on high, the way it came down into the world of Atzilus and Biyah, the way you should notice the difference. It's just like the revealed powers of the soul when you're sleeping. And you can have the opposite. And unfortunately, that's how you have exile. Now, nevertheless, just like in a person down in this world, the concealment during sleeping, what does that mean? That the powers get concealed and they go to its source in the soul. So so when a person is sleeping and the powers go to the soul, where are we lacking? Where is it missing? So what's missing is not in its essence and not in its source. What's lacking is in the revealed powers. That means in the revealed powers, there's chaos. There's no law and order there. However, but the powers, the way they're in their source, in the soul, now even though over there they're all equal, but it's not a problem. And on the contrary, when it's hanging out in its source, it's complete. And matter of fact, more complete when it gets revealed. So the same thing also applies over here as well. That in the time of Golus, and we're saying that that Hashem is, so to speak, sleeping. That means the revealed parts get concealed and it goes to the source. So what happens in the source? In the source is the source of the Jewish people, with all the qualities that the Jewish people have. And it says in Yiddish, with the ganzen Sturm, with the whole bang. And it's just like the powers, the way they're in the source of the soul, where they're complete there. But it's on high in its source. But in this world, you don't see it. And that's why, unfortunately, in this world, you have Gullus. So what Rebbe is saying is, even though in this world it's Gullus, in its source, it's a big party. The Jewish people, we're there. It's strong as ever, and even stronger. So now we'll understand the two opposites of exile. What does that mean? Now, even though on one hand, that in the time of exile, the power of the Jewish people is even greater than the times of the temple. Why? Because what happens in the time of exile? The revealed part doesn't go away. It goes concealed, and it goes to its source, where the source of the Jewish people are. Now, so even though that in this world you don't see the quality, you don't see it. It's not shining the quality of Jewish people. And they receive their energy and anything they need from the nations of the world. That means we are obviously in exile. But nevertheless, it's in its source. It's two opposites. On one hand, in Gullus, we don't see the quality of Jewish people. But on the other hand, the quality of Jewish people in its source is very, very strong. And Rebbe says that's possibly why exile is compared to a state of pregnancy. Why is that? Because in a state of pregnancy, you have the child and you have the opposite of it. In other words, even though that the analogy they give is like a candle on its head, and while the child is in pregnancy, they teach him the whole Torah, and that's specifically while it's in his mother's womb. However, once it gets born, boom, he forgets everything. But nevertheless, when the child in his mother's womb, even though again the light is on his head and he's learning the whole Torah, but his head is in between his knees. What does that mean? You don't see the quality of the head over the feet. And the contrary, where's the head between its feet? Now, even though his food, that means he eats what the mother eats, it doesn't come through the mouth, but it comes through the stomach. And like it's explained many places at length in Torah Oyer of the Alter Rebbe, and in the different Chassidic discourses of the Chassidic Rebbeim afterwards. Side note, the Rebbe actually explains that the whole idea that when it comes through to the when it's in pregnancy, so it doesn't come through the child through its mouth. It means it's missing through the whole process. It goes through the stomach, etc. But back to the point. So what's Rebbe bringing out? That in Gullus you have two opposites. On one hand, you don't see the quality of the Jewish people, but on the other hand, it's connected to its source. Just like a child in its mother's womb. On one hand, it's learning the whole Torah, but the other hand, the head is between the feet. So based on this, Rebbe explains something very, very powerful. We know it's brought down in the Talmud. It says that when the non-Jews went into the temple, when they destroyed the temple, they saw the cherubs, the figures, that they were facing one another. So the question is asked, 1 second. When we say that the cherubs are facing one on the other, what does that represent? It represents the love of Hashem and the Jewish people. Like a man and a woman. They're totally connected. But when the non-Jews came into the temple and we were getting ready to be destroyed and go into exile, it's the opposite of the love. So how is it facing each other? What the Rebbe explains on the contrary, because based on what we explained before, because what happens is, then it was actually a greater light that was shining. What type of light? Not a light in this world, a light above Ishtalshalos. But this light is where in its source. And it unfortunately did not shine down this world, and that's why we're going to Gullus. And that's why it was facing each other. Nevertheless, he'd like to add, based on what it says in Chazal, that before a person takes a trip, before he takes a journey, he has to be intimate with his spouse. Why is that? Because since in the time, in this case, since in the time of exile, where the Jewish people are like a spouse that her husband is going out of town, so before he leaves, there was the intimacy, and that's why the images, the cherubs are facing one another. So Beis Medrash explains even deeper why the exile is compared to pregnancy, and the redemption is actually that giving birth. Why is that? Because just like in this world, when a person is intimate with a spouse, so then you have the creation and development of a child, but this doesn't come out right away. First, it goes into pregnancy in the womb of the mother. That means it's totally concealed. And afterwards, in a way where the head is, so to speak, is between the feet. And throughout the whole process of pregnancy, it grows until at the end, it comes out in a revealed way to the world. So the same thing also on a spiritual level. That from when that connection took place before the exile, right away, it was powerful. Just when that connection took place, before we were going into Galus, and Hashem was, so to speak, intimate with the Jewish people, so right away, what we saw in this world was exile. But no. What was being created was a new child, even down here, but it was concealed. And the concealment that's why there's exile. Just like pregnancy. And throughout the whole time of exile, just like a child in his mother's womb, it's growing throughout exile. We're growing from day to day until in the future we're going to have the birth and the revelation with the future redemption, which is obviously a very, very, very powerful message and perspective to realize that in Gullus, even though we don't see godliness, but guess what? We are in the growing, just like in a mother's womb, we're growing in the concealment, and we're eventually going to have the great revelation. And he continues on to explain the Chassidic discourse, and that's why on that night, Hashem couldn't sleep, referring to Hashem, and that's why that was the main miracle. And that happened, how did that happen? Hashem couldn't sleep, because the Jewish people went on, I'll say in Hebrew, I'll translate it, Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice a whole year. What does that mean? And Rebbe explains this. Where does Mesiras Nefesh come from? I'm willing to do anything and everything to do what Hashem wants. Pray, study, mitzvot, etc. It comes from the point of the soul, which is higher than powers of intellect, logic, emotions, etc. Which part of the soul? It comes from, Mesiras Nefesh comes from Yechida, which is the most powerful part and the strongest part of the soul. And it's not logical, it's not emotional, and it's not functional. It's the essence of who we are. In other words, what does Mesiras Nefesh mean? You don't make any calculations, intellectual or any type of calculations. And you connect to the source of the soul. Just like the way all the powers go into its source during sleeping. Now, when a person's sleeping, so what happens then is the powers go into the source, and in a revealed place, it's all concealed. And it goes into the source. However, there's a big difference. Mesiras Nefesh means, on the contrary, that essence of the soul is actually awakened and is actually revealed, and that affects on all the powers, the intellect and emotions that are in the place of the body, that they should be totally accepting to the soul and should not get intimidated from anything else. And that's why when the Jewish people went to Mesiras Nefesh, means they went in self-sacrifice, they connected to Hashem beyond logic. They connected themselves from the essence of their soul. So then Hashem woke up. The king of the world woke up. Why is that? When the essence of our soul, which is above any logical part of the person, gets revealed, so then what happens is Hashem wakes up. What means that the essence of the godly side of Hashem, which normally is, so to speak, sleeping during Galus, was revealed, was giving off light in a revealed way. And we'll understand this more specific based on what it's known, that the completion and the full part of self-sacrifice is when self-sacrifice comes from, we said, the Yechida, the most powerful internal part of the soul. But it's not just when your Yechida comes out, but it comes into your specific powers of the intellect and the emotions. Like it says, we say in Shema, b'chol levavcha, in your whole heart, b'chol nafshecha, which means with your whole soul, that even in all the details of every single power should be infused with Mesiras Nefesh. Which means you're serving Hashem without logic. And this level of Mesiras Nefesh self-sacrifice was by every single Jewish person, from the young to the old, from the children to the woman. What does that mean? That the details of the Mesiras Nefesh of every single person, again, the elder, the young, the children, the woman, was in a way of everybody was Mesiras Nefesh self-sacrifice. And that's why what it says in reference to in the Chassidic discourse, in reference to Mesiras Nefesh, that the Mesiras Nefesh was a whole year. Now, what is that? What's the point of saying a whole year? Because we know throughout the year there's different seasons, and like it's explained in many Chassidic discourses about, for example, the quality of the etrog. That esrog, we know, is on a spiritual levels, it's connected to Malchus, which the sphere of Malchus, which is also connected to Esther. And we know the etrog grows on a tree throughout the whole year. As a matter of fact, in every single season, there's a different spiritual service. And not only that every season, but every single day in that season. There's a specific spiritual work for that specific day. Like it says clearly, Kol yoima v'yoima avadvidta. Every single day we have different work to do. But they nevertheless went on Mesiras Nefesh self-sacrifice every single season, every single day. So you could say, what does it mean? That even in the things of Shana, which means the different spiritual work of every single day was self-sacrifice, which means above limits and above logic. And that's why it says, Nadada, that it couldn't sleep. The king couldn't sleep. Where did it come from? It came from the fact that the Jewish people went on Mesiras Nefesh a whole year. Why? Because since their Mesiras Nefesh self-sacrifice was shining in a revealed way, but not just over them, but literally penetrated their intellect and their emotions and every single part of their being and every single day of their life. So that's what happened the same thing with Hashem. That the light, above Ishtalshlos, the superpower light of Nod the Shashamalach, the king woke up, came down what? In an internal way. Until he said to bring the book of the history. Divrei Hayom, bring me the history book. In other words, that it came down even into the history, in every single day, which means in the source of time. Like he explains at length in that Chassidic discourse, until they found that it's written that even in the history books of Shushan Bir, literally, that even in the time of Galus, that when they went into Galus in Elam, which is referring to Shushan, the Shekhinah was with them over there as well. Just like in the exile of Elam, which is referring to Shushan, the same thing also applies to every single exile. That anywhere a Jew is in exile, Hashem is with you. And even in the Galus, the exile of Edom, Hashem is with you. Wherever a person is, Hashem is with you. How does that? When a person stands in Mesiras Nefesh, you go in self-sacrifice. It means you don't use any logic. It never explains what is, as we know strongly, there was many times says over here as well. What is the Mesiras Nefesh in our generation? That we're not embarrassed from people that make fun, and that's also connected to the idea of Mesiras Nefesh. And the component of Mesiras Nefesh and self-sacrifice, not to be embarrassed from anybody. It not just, okay, you're not embarrassed conceptually. No, but it plays out in reality, in every one of our powers, and all the details, in learning Torah and doing mitzvahs throughout the day. And this that a person is not embarrassed. And we know it's the beginning of the first of the four books of the Jewish law. Right in the beginning, it says not to be embarrassed. Up to the point that the level of Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, brings the person not just to do what you're supposed to, but to do more than you're supposed to learn more Torah than you're supposed to, and to do it in a beautiful way when it comes to doing mitzvah. It's not just to get the mitzvah done, but to do it in a beautiful way. Up to the point when you add in a way without making any calculations. Why is that? Because it's coming from Mesiras Nefesh. When you're working in Mesiras Nefesh, there is no calculations. And it's noticeable in the learning Torah and the doing mitzvahs that everything you're doing is doing it in a way of Mesiras Nefesh. How much more so your love for Hashem, your awe for Hashem. That means you're learning Torah, you're not just learning an academic book. You're remembering it's Hashem that gave you the Torah. And when you're doing a mitzvah, you're feeling that Hashem commanded you to do this mitzvah. Like it says, Hashem commanded us. And like it's explained at length in the Chassidic discourse of the Mittler Rebbe, that in every single mitzvah you have to have the general meditation, which applies to all the mitzvahs, that you're doing the mitzvah because it's the mitzvah that Hashem gave us. And we go on, when we do the spiritual work of self-sacrifice, and especially when the self-sacrifice permeates us in all the specific details of learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, then what happens is, Hashem can't sleep. And what happens when Hashem can't sleep? He brings down from the light which is above Hishtalshelus, up to like we learned before, the book of the history, which is the source of time. And it should be read in front of the king, and in front of the king of Achashverosh, literally, in this physical world. As we know, unfortunately, we're still servants of Achashverosh, because we're living in exile. And as we know, the law of the government is the law. And Mordechai is not the king. He's only an assistant to the king, Mishnah al-Melech. But nevertheless, even then, you can have the kings will go ahead and serve us, and they'll make a decree. And those who were initially against Judaism, and against Jews, that they should help Judaism and Jews, up to the point we're going to have ishapcha chashaycha and ahira, that darkness is going to be transformed into light, and bitterness is going to become sweet. Just like in the times of Mordechai and Esther, that the king Ahasuerus made a decree against the opposition, that he should go ahead and announce in front of Mordechai, the Jew, that this is what you should do. I'll say in Hebrew, Kachal Yasal Ish Asher Melech Chafetz Bikar. This you should do, that the one that the king wants, the one likes him, and we're referring to obviously the king of the world, and obviously Lahavdil, so to speak, king of Achashverosh, literally, up to the point that what did we have? We had Asher La Yehudim Hoysa Eira. For the Jewish people, there was light, the Simcha, and there was happiness, the Sasa and Vikar, and the celebration and good times. And the same thing it should be for us. We should have the light, and we all know what is the real light. The light is Torah, and Torah itself. Torah with feminine, which is referring to the revealed part of the Torah, and the Torah with all the commentaries. That from there, from the Torah, the light goes out to the whole world. And what is simcha? What is joy? It's referring to the holidays. And what is sasa? It's referring to the mitzvah of circumcision. And what is yikar? The mitzvah of putting on tefillin. As we know, all the Torah is compared to tefillin. And you could say that it's also referring to the tefillin of Hashem. That it said, what does it say in there? That mi ka'amcha Yisrael ge'ech ba'aretz, who's like the Jewish people, one nation. Now, what's noticeable? The quality of the Jewish people, not the Shnas HaMelech, and we see the real quality of the Jewish people. And the Rebbe says he'd like to connect one redemption to the next redemption, that from this redemption, that for the Jewish people then we had light, and we had joy, and we had happiness. When we find ourselves in the last days of moments of exile, which should come to a close to the redemption, the true redemption, the complete redemption that we're going to have. The nations of the world are going to bring the Jewish people, just like they brought the Jewish people then in the sacrifices in a pure vessel to the land of Israel, the land that, and this is important to say this, that Rebbe always stressed, Tamid Einei Hashem Alekechaba, that Hashem's eyes are on the land of Israel, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and over there specifically in Yerushalayim, the place of the king of David, Melech Mashiach, and over there specifically in the holy mountain and Migdash Hashem Koine Necha, and the base of Migdash Hashem formed, and this is all going to happen. This is in a very, very quick way, up to the point of quick, without making any calculations, up to the point of ad lo yada. It's not going to be. You're not going to know the difference. And like the Rebbe says in Yiddish, in Matan Starayim, we jump in b'simcha rabba, with tremendous joy, without any limits, in the redemption, the true redemption, the complete redemption. Bimheira v'yameinu mamash, should happen quick and speedy, literally. That for all the Jewish people of all the generations, and in leading it will be the leader of our generation, and Mordechai, the Jew, and Esther, the queen. They're all going to come and go out of this exile, and we're going to have the complete redemption together with the complete Jewish people and the complete Torah and the complete land of Israel, in a way that Hashem is going to expand the borders of also Eretz, the land of Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni. And the verse obviously doesn't go out from its literal translation. On the contrary, the literal translation is referring to this physical world, the world of action, which is the main place and the foundation of all the levels, and especially like it's known where it says V'hinei Hashem Nitzav Alav, Hashem is standing over us, and in a literal way, Deborah finishes off so powerfully that very, very soon we're going to have the redemption, the true redemption, the complete redemption of all the people, of all the generations, the souls in the body, and it's going to happen through Mashiach Tzidkenu, Mashiach, the righteous one, B'mheira v'yameinu mamash, very, very quick in our days in a literal level. So here you see the real power, a beautiful Chassidic discourse about the real power of the Jewish people, that the fact is, even in Golus, where it seems like, where's Hashem? And people don't recognize that we're the chosen people. But guess what? In the source, we're even more powerful. And that doesn't go away in the time of Golus. And by us going on Mesiras Nefesh, not thinking, not logic, and just doing what Hashem wants, Hashem will wake up and bring the ultimate Geula, the ultimate redemption, and we'll all be together in Yerushalayim HaKodesh, and God willing, our next class will be in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. Have a great and blessed week. Shavua Tov.